In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to use factoring to solve equations. We're going to start with the basics. When we look at 6 times x equals 0 in this first equation, we know that 6 times the variable x equals 0, and so we have to think, what can we multiply times 6 to get 0? Well, it would need to be 0, because 0 is the only thing you can use to multiply and get 0. When we see x times y equals 0, we know that either x is 0 or y is 0, or both. When an equation gets a little more complicated, like this one, x times x minus 2, one of these parts has to equal 0 in order to multiply and get 0. So either this x is 0, or if we look in here, if x is 2, that would also make the equation 0, because 2 minus 2 is 0, and then if you multiply that times 2, you still get 0. So for this one, x would be 0, or it could be 2. And we just list both as answers. When you look at this next one, we have x squared. Well, what squared gives you 0? Because one of these parts has to equal 0. So, well, the only number we can square and get 0 is 0, so x could be 0. And what value of x here makes this 0? Well, if x is -3, -3 plus 3 would be 0. So that makes the whole equation 0. So 0 and -3 work for that one. If we look at these last two, now we have a binomial times a binomial equals 0. Well, one of those has to be 0. So we look at this one. What value of x would make this whole binomial 0? Well, if x was -1, it would equal 0. So x could equal -1. And what value of x makes this one 0? +5, because 5 minus 5 is 0. So there's our two solutions. The last one, same thing, x equals, what makes this 0? -6. What makes this one 0? +9. So now we need to look at how we get it into that factored form. Each one of these has been in factored form to start with. When we look at this first equation, it's not in factored form because there's still all this addition. So we look and say, is there a common factor? Yes, there's an x in both terms. So if we factor out the x, we get x times x plus 1 equals 0. Since we're down to just x plus 1 in the parentheses, we're done factoring. There's nothing else we can do with that. So we look at what makes this x 0. What value could you plug in? Well, it would need to be 0. Ooh. And then what value of x makes this part 0? -1. The next two examples there work the same way, so we're going to move on. Now we're looking at trinomials. So with trinomials, we need to go ahead and factor this one. It's already ready to be factored. It's set equal to 0. What gives us x squared is x times x. We see the signs need to be the same in order to give us +9, and they're both going to need to be negative in order to give us the -10. What factors of 9 will add to give us 10? 1 and 9. And then, now that it's in factored form, we can say, what makes this first part equal 0? What value of x? Well, if x was 1, that would be 0, so x equals 1. What value of x makes this 0? 9. So those are our values for x. And if we plug those back into the original equation, we would get it to equal 0. On this next one, you'll notice it's a little different because it's not set equal to 0. Well, we need to get it set equal to 0 first, so we're going to subtract 4x and subtract 32 from both sides of our equation. So we get x squared minus 4x minus 32 equals, and then over here on the right, that canceled to give us 0. And now we can factor it. We know to get x squared, we need to do x times x. To get -32, we're going to need to do a positive and a negative. And then we list all our factors of 32. 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 4 and 8. And then we look for ones that we could add and get -4. Well, if it was +4 and -8, that would work. So we want to do -8, +4. Now that it's in factored form, we just look at what piece makes each of them 0. What value of x makes this 0? -4. What value of x makes this 0? +8. And that's how you solve equations using factoring.